Everything is so difficult now. Everything's so tough. It really is. Every single person seems to be struggling with the same type thing. And it's the fact that we're all working 40 hours a week and we're still not making ends meet. We're still barely scraping by. And it's insane because so many of us are feeling the same thing, but it's confusing because it didn't used to be this way, right? This didn't used to be the way it was in America. Everyone is tired, not of working full time, but of working full time and still falling farther behind. We are tired of checking our bank account before going to the grocery store, tired of checking the bank account before you go to the doctor's office. It feels like people can do everything right, but there's still one little issue away from financial ruin. They're still stressed all the time. And this was not normal just a couple years, just a couple decades ago. And it's so crazy. It really is. And then when you bring this up, people get frustrated, people get angry, when I think it's really clear that it is simply not the America that it once was. And we just all have to figure out, rather than fighting over what the problem is, like, hey, there is a problem. Why don't we slow down and look at the issues and try to figure out what's happening? Because when the majority of people are working full time, but are still stressed about money, not like getting rich money, not like I need a bunch of fancy shit money, like I want to buy food, but I can't buy the majority of the things in the grocery store. That's why doesn't full-time work feel stable? It's like working, I always thought growing up, like, oh yeah, you get a job, you work 40 hours and you don't have to like worry that much because that allows you to get a couple months worth of savings. You're able to have a little bit of prosperity, not super rich, just stable. Just like I don't have to worry about checking my bank account before the grocery store. I don't have to worry about checking my bank account when I pay my mortgage or my rent every month. I know I've got enough. And just that little, just that pain of having that stress all the time has got to be so difficult. And all that we're asking, it doesn't make sense because we worked 40 hours a couple decades ago, and that 40 hours would cover the cost of living for the entire family. And now we have two adults in most households working 40 hours, and it still barely covers enough, right? So look how this actually affects your real life. Go to the grocery store, you can barely buy anything, right? You have to choose between, well, do I pay the power bill right now or do I go to the doctor? And that's where I have this little saying where it's like, put off the doctor to pay the light bill and just never got better, right? And it's so crazy because look, the cost of living, groceries, gas, rent, medicine, just what you need to live costs more than the average salary. That's why Americans under 40 are the first generation in our country's history to be worse off than their parents. Because we're working 40 hours a week, and that still doesn't cover the basics. The basics. And humans need more than just the basics to live. We don't just need to eat, sleep, work. Oh, we're good. We need connection. We need other things. We don't even have freedom, really. Because let me ask you this. Could you quit your job tomorrow? If your job started treating you poorly, could you walk away from it? Not forever, just for a couple months, couple weeks. But if we already know the answer for everybody, then we can't, right? So if you can't even quit your job that is a bad situation, if you can't even leave a bad situation, are you really free? right? That's what it really comes down to. If you can't even leave your job where your boss is treating you like crap, are you really free? Because if you leave your job, it's almost like a fake prison, right? Because you can leave your job, there's no locks, there's no doors, there's no guards. But if you leave, there's no opportunity either, right? You're not going to get chased down, you're not going to get yelled at. You just won't be able to find what you need to live. And that's where we drop the me's in the chat, y'all. Because one of the things they do is they make us feel so isolated. They literally have made the cost of living higher than the average salary, and they make us feel like it's our fault. That's what they do. They make the cost of living higher than the average salary, and they blame it on us for not working hard enough. And it's not even the money, right? It's the isolation. It's being told that you feel alone. Because then people go, oh, it's my fault. I must be bad with money. I must have chosen the wrong career. But when 80% of people don't have enough savings, that's not laziness. That's not life choices gone wrong. That's why people have to go to work sick. That's why people consistently have to put their job over their families and their children. That didn't used to be normal. And it's why people under 40 are the first generation in our country's history to be worse off than their parents. Because look, food, housing, healthcare usually is about $3,500 a month. But then that's exactly what the average salary is. There's no security. Nobody has anything. Because imagine, they don't want you to have 3 months worth of savings. Because if you had 3 months worth of savings, then you could say, screw you, boss. I'm not doing that. And the boss goes, well, I'm going to fire you. And you go, I don't care. I got 6 months worth of savings. I'll find something. So that's where they don't want us to have any savings. Because if we don't have any savings, if we don't have any money, then we are stuck, right? We're stuck. Well, no, absolutely, Sweet James. There's a lot of people that are feeling bad right now. It's just that on average, it's Americans under 40 who didn't get any of the good economy that left us right there. So, but it can come back, though. We are able to create the conditions where the majority of people are able to prosper. It's literally all we need is to have the essentials cost like 20 to 30% of your salary. That's it. Because we started working a lot harder. We started making so much more money for the company, but they didn't pay us the money that we made. What ended up happening is that we got more productive because of the internet. If we used to make $1,000 in a week, now we make $10,000 in a week. But look at this gap. This is 1980, where what we made for the company was really close to what they paid us. Now, what we make for the company is 4, 5, 6, 8 times higher than what they pay us. Has nothing to do with the government either. It really does have to do with corporations, because it used to be that the government actually worked for us, and the government is just one of the pillars of power in our society that no longer work for us. So the first one was the economy. It used to be that we had mom and pop shops. There were local stores, and those local stores actually cared about us because those local owners, they're a part of the community. So they care what happens to the community. And Walmart and Home Depot, they came on in, lowered their prices, and completely got rid of all of the local mom and pop shops. So that was kind of the first step that happened. And then when there was no competition, productivity goes up, but pay doesn't, because pay doesn't have to go up when there's no competition. Especially if you own every single company in town. America's basically just a giant company town where essentially over 85% of corporations on the S&P 500 have the same 3 top shareholders. So when they're trying to screw you over, when the boss is intentionally like, no matter how hard you work, I'm not going to give you a raise because I don't have to, then that's not your fault. That's not people being lazy. That's a rigged system. Because when we no longer have a choice of where we work or where we shop, we lose all the power. Because Walmart knows that they don't have to pay their employees enough to care. Because when you walk in and ask that Walmart employee a question and they roll their eyes and walk the other way, I don't blame that Walmart employee. They're not paid enough to care. But Walmart executives know that you can't just walk out of there and go down the street to the local general store. So they underpay their employees because they're trying to take as much out of your community. We all know at this point, corporations aren't trying to make your community better. Corporations aren't trying to make your family's life better. Corporations are only trying to get more money for the corporations. So we really got to stop relying on them because they don't care about us. They don't care about our community. In fact, the CEOs are incentivized to screw you over. They really are, because they are never going to make more money than they are at that CEO position that they have right there. And they're incentivized to get their quarterly bonus. They're not incentivized to look 5 and 10 years down the line at the long-term vision of the choices that they're making, at the long-term consequences. They are only incentivized what happens in 3 months, what happens in 6 months, what happens in 12 months. How can we maximize profit right now because I need to make more money while I have this opportunity? And it's not about left or right whatsoever. Both sides are the problem. One of the things they want us to do is fight with each other over red versus blue, over Republican versus Democrat. Because honestly, the more that we argue over what the problem is, the more power they have, right? So that's one of the main tenets of this, is that left versus right is just a sham, because they want us fighting and arguing. And in fact, they make 1,000 different issues for us to fight over, whether it's red versus blue, immigrants, trans athletes, foreign wars, climate change. They stoke the division among us because they know the more divided we are, the more power they have. Because really, the ultra wealthy need us more than we need them. That's really what it is. But they recognize that as long as we are fighting, we will never get on the same page to take the power back. Because really, those ultra wealthy people, all they do is bring a little bit of money to the table. We're the ones that actually do the hard work. We are the economy, everybody. We are the ones that actually make these companies money. I showed the stat earlier, but the CEOs are not the essential workers. It's the goddamn people running the factory. It's the people trucking the products across the country. It's the warehouse workers. Because without those other people, the billionaire could never make their money. Imagine America as 10 people who need to make 10 slices of bread to survive. That one person is relying on the other 9 people. Because they need those other 9 people to make the bread. And you are so right. Money is not power, but money allows you to take over the institutions in a society that then give you that power. Money is the first step in power, because that's what they've done. The money doesn't matter. The money has allowed them to take over the economy. The money has allowed them to take over the media, and the money has allowed them to take over the political process. And what power actually is power is control over the essentials. So they have power over us, not because they have money. They have power over us because they're the people that feed us. They're the people that house us. They're the people that clothe us. The people that feed you are the people with power over you. And most people are just tired. We are pissed off. We know that there's a problem. We're just sick of it. And we recognize that, well, what are we going to do on our own? We're tired of checking our bank account before going to the damn grocery store. I am so sick of people being like, well, this group is the problem. Well, that group is the problem. Just give me a second here, Naya. What I like to do is take some time making sure we have the diagnosis as a consensus amongst everyone, because what we need to do is have an agreement on what the problem is, or else we'll never be able to get to that solution. Because if some people think it's an earache and some people think it's a backache and other people think it's cancer, well, we're never going to be able to work forward for progress. Really, community is the solution, but we'll get there in just a second. But it's really, I am so sick of people being like, oh, well, that group is the problem. Oh, well, that is the problem. Not at all. We walk through many different doors to get here. So this is Black Out the System. We are an economic pushback group because we recognize that the corporations control everything. And even though the corporations control everything, they don't really care about us. Like, they don't care about us at all. They care about us so little, they'll put sawdust in your Parmesan cheese. They care about us so little that health insurance companies will deny life-saving care just because it'll cost them a little bit of money to be able to provide that care. And what it really is so many people are brainwashed, right? They are brainwashed into believing that, hey, that corporation that puts sawdust in your food, when people talk about it, that's whining. Hey, that health insurance company that you paid your whole life, but when then your parent needed life-saving care, they denied it. Oh, that's just people just whining. There's no way we could actually create a society that works for the people who do the hard work, right? Because it's not like the people that do the hard work are the ones actually making the money. I can go and build a factory anywhere, but unless I have 1,000 people that are going to come work at that factory, I can't make shit. And unless I have another 1,000 people to truck those products all across the country, I can't sell anything. And unless I've got people to stock the shelves and cashiers to sell it, then you're not making any money whatsoever. To put it another way, if you want to deliver 10,000 packages in a day, you need to rely on other people. So those other people should be paid. Artem family, I appreciate the me. If anybody else there is feeling this, let's get some me's dropped in the chat, because one of the things they do is they make it feel like we're the only ones, right? They make us feel like we're the only ones that this is happening to. They make it feel like it's our fault. That's what pisses me off. They make the cost of living higher than the average salary. Then they go and lie to us in the media and say that the majority of people just can't budget. It's the majority of people are just lazy. And then what happens is we've got people that are absolute fools that are pointing at one group. And it's so funny, is those people that are pointing at one group, they always think they're special. They always think they're smarter than everybody else. But it's almost the opposite to me. If you are saying this one group of people has caused all the problems, well, that makes you not so smart, right? Because you don't have nuance, you don't have understanding. It's gray, it's not black and white. So that's where America had to walk through many doors to get here, right? America had to walk through many doors to get here. And Chris, I'm sorry. I cannot believe that you said before Obamacare, because that's where, Chris, this isn't for you. Go on, move on. Because if somebody still has their head in the sand after all this time, then we don't care about convincing you. What this is about is having the 70% of people that want to move forward with progress, that believe all humans have intrinsic value. Because if people are actually intelligent, what they would understand is that the point of a society is to have as many people as possible, achieve security, achieve prosperity. Because actually, if you give people what they need to live, food, housing, healthcare, they contribute more to a society, not less. If somebody lives up to their fullest potential and has what they need for security and prosperity, they contribute more to society, not less. So every single person should have food, housing, and healthcare, because then they're not worried about only themselves. They are worried about other people. Not only that, it's a more efficient way to structure your economy, because then when people go and take a job, when they want to contribute to society, they do so off of where their efforts will be most valued. They don't have to go chase a job just based off of money. It's, man, I would love to be a teacher, but I don't make enough money doing that. So I'm going to go work as a banker. Well, one of those things really helps the rest of society, and one of those things kind of doesn't. And it's so funny that people truly believe that poverty may be a choice. Because all I am asking you is to picture somebody, a child that is born to the factory owner versus a child that is born to the factory employee. So you truly believe that the child that is born to the factory owner will have the same opportunity as the child who's born to the factory employee? Because I can tell you the majority of people's education and their net worth comes down to the zip code you were born into, because the zip code you were born into decides the educational quality you receive, and the education you receive determines what skills you get. So let's work backwards for the people in the back. You need food to live, right? Don't you need food to live? Well, where do you get your food from? You get your food from your job, right? From money. And where do you get your job from? You get your job from your education, right? If it's an 18, 19-year-old that doesn't have any family, they need to go ahead and make their way in this world. They just got out of high school, and so the only thing that they have is their education. So if that person, if the child of the factory worker got the exact same education as the child of the factory owner, then we understand what you're saying. Then it would be somewhat equal opportunity. But it's not that way. The child of the factory owner has a more expensive house and zip code. Because they live in a more expensive house, then they go to a nicer school. Because they go to a nicer school, they're able to obtain more skills and get a better education. And then that person has a better chance of getting a job over the person that's born to the factory worker. Put it this way, if you could choose to be born to the factory employee, or if you could choose to be born to the factory owner, who would you choose? If all children could choose whether they were born into a house that was rich or whether they could be born into a house that is poor, what would they choose, right? And what we're really asking for the people that are popping in here, why doesn't working 40 hours provide a little bit of security? Why doesn't working 40 hours make it so that you're not afraid to go to the grocery store? Working 40 hours a week should mean that you never stress about your rent or your housing payment coming out of your bank account, right? Because the cost of living should not be equal to the average salary, right? Yes, Chris. So your net worth, who you know, depends your net worth. But then earlier you were saying and that's what it really comes down to, is that if people don't have the same opportunity, if people don't have the same education, then they are not going to have the same skills. And therefore, one set of people will always have less of an advantage. It's really not that hard to see either, right? Because if you got to choose, wouldn't everybody choose to be born in that $1 million house instead of the $10,000 house, right? So, and if we know that your net worth is what determines your net worth, then it makes sense that we should understand that some people are born with less of an opportunity due to no power of their own. They are literally born the same way that somebody is born without legs or without an arm, and then we're like, hey, that person was born without legs. They deserve a little bit more of an opportunity than the rest of us because they were born at a disadvantage. The same exact way that somebody who's born into a house that's worth $10,000, the property tax is so low, they are born into a situation that gives them a natural disadvantage. But once again, Chris, you are not understanding that unless you are at that area. I am literally in the heart of Baltimore, and you are telling people who have been served systemic racism for decades to just go network at volunteer events. Is that really what it should be? Is that what our society should be banking upon? Oh no, we shouldn't set up an equal education system. A guy named Chris Burgers thinks that we should just volunteer at networking events, and that will get people out of the problem. Well, that's where, so this is a great point. Everybody, there will be so many people with their heads in the sand. We do not need to try to convince someone that rather than fixing our educational opportunity amongst citizens in America, where the factory employee's child gets a similar education to the factory owner's child, Mr. Burgers thinks that we should all just volunteer at networking events. Y'all, this is why it doesn't matter what you say to them. Their head will always be in the sand. Because when you have a system that only gives advantages to certain sets of people, whether consciously or subconsciously, they will always prop up the system that serves them. Right? And we drop the me's in here. Let's get some me's from everybody that feels this, because they make the cost of living higher than the average salary, and then they make us feel like shit for it, right? They make the cost of living higher than the average salary, and then they go to the media and go, record news, Americans are lazy and they don't know how to budget, right? Right? It's so funny, 510, because tell me if this is socialistic. I believe that the hallmark of a capitalistic society is competition, you mofo. Do you really see any competition in America today? The general stores are gone. There's no more local general stores. In fact, Walmart made sure of it. They came in, they lowered their prices, they ran out all the local mom and pop shops. And that matters because the local mom and pop shops actually cared about you. If their employee came and rolled their eyes at you, they'd have a talking to with their employee. And it's so funny. You go to Ace and Home Depot, those employees aren't going to be helpful. If you actually had some local stores, they would be delighted to help you out. And it's the lack of competition that we have in America that lets us know we're in a situation with crony capitalism. Over 85% of companies on the S&P 500 have the same three top shareholders. We are living in a monopoly. It's not hard to see. And when there is a monopoly among employers, then basically what they're doing is they're cooperating to make sure they always dominate us. So 1% of people are showing us the way forward. It's working together. Yes, 85% of corporations have the same three top shareholders: Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. So imagine if you were a greedy asshole and you owned every business in town. Well, if you owned every business in town, well, then what you'd probably do is lower your salaries, because why would you pay a high salary if you don't have to compete with any other businesses? So you lower your salaries, but you want to keep making more money. So you raise your prices just a little bit because nobody's stopping you. It's a free market, right?
So the same people that have lowered our salaries are the same ones that have raised the prices. And in every single instance where there was less competition, the prices went up. So the cereal aisle is one that you may see. Over 80% of cereals are completely dominated by three corporations, Post, Kellogg, and one more. And in the last 5 years, the price of cereal has skyrocketed up because competition is what brings prices down. Competition is good for consumers. It is, BBOK. But that's where we have to explain the economic aspect so thoroughly, because the media has literally lied to us. The media used to be there. So the economy is the first problem. The media used to be there so that we all were in the same reality. Do you all remember that? We all believed the same things because they told us that 2 + 2 = 4. But they figured out that if we tell this group of people that 2 + 2 = 4, but we tell this group of people that 2 + 2 = 5, well, then they'll always be fighting against each other. And they won't even argue about what they're hearing. They'll say, well, why are their facts different? What's wrong with them? And they'll start to disdain and resent each other. And then when they start not seeing each other as human, then that's when we'll turn that frustration they have into anger. We'll turn that anger that they have into hate. And that's what's happened in America today. Not because we are different, but because the 1% took so much. They took more than their fair share. So because they took way too much, there's not enough for the rest of us. So stay with me for a minute here. We are going to go ahead and hit some stats. So imagine America as 10 people who need to make bread together to survive. Those 10 people make 10 slices of bread together. How much does everybody get? Well, in America today, the 1% have as much as 90% of us. That means one person is taking 5 slices of bread. And the other 9 people are fighting over 5 slices. So that's why we're divided, y'all. Because there's 9 of us and we see 5 pieces of food on the bread. I don't care how much I love all y'all. If I know that there's not enough for my family, I'm getting pretty nasty pretty quick, right? That is the division in America today. It's not that we are more different. It's that the 1% have taken a shitload more than they should have. There is $160 trillion in our economy. And the top 10% have like 100 trillion of it. So all that we're saying is that if you do the hard work, you should get your fair share of the reward. All we're saying is that if we see the stock prices go up and up and up every single year, for the last 15 years, the stock prices have gone up. Why have the salaries not gone up at all? Not a little bit. Because they know, where else are we going to go to work, right? Where else are we going to go to work? And we know it right here. The cost of living is higher than the average salary. So how much harder do you want us to work, right? How much harder do you want us to work? And here's the thing, that's what they say. Just go get a better job, go get more skills. But when you can't even miss a day of work without having to go without eating, where if you missed a week of work, you wouldn't be able to pay your rent, then how are you going to go get a new skill if you're already working 9 and 10 hours a day? If you've got 2 or 3 kids and you need to take care of them, how are you going to go move across the country to get a new job? If you are just barely hanging on to a life raft and that's the only thing keeping you up from drowning, when somebody comes along and goes, hey, just let go of the life raft. Go to that other life raft over there. What are you doing? So you want them to let go underwater, come back up, grab onto something that they're not sure if it will be there for them. That is unrealistic. The only way that people have the ability to go get more skills, go get more job, to go get a better job, is if they have prosperity, y'all. Come on. I know you're smarter than this. if we had 1 month, they say you should have 6 months of savings, right? 6 months in your emergency savings. Well, the reason they don't want us to have 6 months in our emergency savings is because that's what gives us security. So I imagine that the majority of people don't even have 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. So the people in the comments are saying, hey, before you even have any savings, go ahead and try to, risk everything to go get a new skill. And then that new skill might not even pay off. But this is what you have to do, where it's like, well, why didn't we just set up our educational system so that people had the skills that they needed on the offset? Oh, it's because if a child is born to the factory worker versus being born to the factory owner, they're going to get a different set of skills. They're going to get a different education. And our society is completely set up on those people at the bottom not getting the skills to have upward mobility. Because if you keep them stuck, if you make sure they never have 3 months worth of savings, then they can never say no to that crappy job. If they are 2 weeks away from losing their house, of course they're going to accept minimum wage. And what pisses me off, the reason we drop the me's is because what they do is they literally make the cost of living more expensive than the average salary, and then they blame us for it. That is what the issue is. They make the cost of living more expensive than the average salary, and they blame us for it. Well, that's where we are coming together and we are saying, we have had enough. We are the economy. Because working 40 hours a week should cover the freaking basics. That's it. Working 40 hours a week means that you should be able to afford to buy food without stressing, without being like, because, man, I don't remember my parents ever having to choose between having to check their bank account. Hey, hon, before we go to the grocery store, let me just see how much money we have. I mean, I know that happened, but it was on a much less scale, much larger scale, or much less of a large scale. So we just dropped the Discord. If anybody wants to be a part of this community that we are building, this is what it is really all about. Because when the system stops working for us, we build a new one. We don't go back. We don't have to invent something new. This isn't complex. We start talking with each other. We start connecting again. We rely on each other's. There are only 1,000 billionaires in this country. So, and that's where, y'all, this is not living beyond your means. Brandon, I appreciate you because that fool right ahead of you. When the average salary is lower than the average cost of living, if you literally believe people are living beyond their means, then you're part of the problem. We are not trying to convince you. We, in fact, don't even really care what you think, right? Because this is how real change starts, not by asking the system to make a change, but by all of us coming together. Well, Carrie, that's where I don't care about undoing the brainwashing or the unlearning. I know it's only 20 or 30% of people that believe that. And they only feel so loud because they've got a billionaire's thumb on the scale. Our goal is to get the other 70% of people and say, look, we are not going to argue with the people whose head are still in the sand. We know that if enough of us get together and build the system that we need to survive, then eventually those people will be like, oh, the system's great. The system's great. And then one day they'll finally get screwed over. They'll finally feel the pain that we all feel. And what will they do? They'll look around and go, damn, I need to stop doing this, right? So, and that's where people like Campbell, people like 2016 Cubs, y'all just don't understand. And I'm sorry, because just do the math. Go look up the average rent, which is about $2,000, $2,100. Go look up the average car payment, car insurance, internet, food. The average salary, you just said it, 65K. After before taxes, 5250. After taxes, 3800. 65K is 3800. I just went through all the numbers. It's very easy to get there, right? It doesn't matter if you create more, if you earn more than the cost of living, because the cost of living simply shouldn't be near the average salary. That's the problem. Well, it's not only that, Eric, it's that people just literally don't understand. It's that you could say, hey, all we're saying is that America isn't in its heyday. And they come in and go, oh, commies, ah. And that's how you know they're thinking with their emotions and not with their brains, right? Because what they're saying isn't logical. What they're saying doesn't make any sense. They're just afraid. And that's because if somebody has only ever lived in the house that they grew up in, and then one day you tell them, hey, we're moving to a new house, they'll be like, no, I don't want to. I know that this house isn't great, but I've lived here my whole life, right? So that's what it comes down to, is they're just stuck in their ways, and the house that they're living in might be bad for the other people there, but it actually works out well for them because they're the ones on top, right? So those people are really just protecting their own ego because they're afraid of any kind of change. So that's where we drop the, you literally just said car payments. That would be a necessity. And it doesn't matter when the cost of living, when you add up housing, car insurance, electricity, and food, that's close to $3,500 a month. And the average take-home pay is between $35,000 and $4,000 a month. So JFL, there is a plan. I'll be getting to it here in just a second, because what we really need to do is get everybody on the same page first. Because one of the biggest problems is even people that want to change with us, J-Flow, then if they believe that, oh, Trump is the problem, Republicans are the problem, foreign countries, foreign influence are the problem, well, we're not going to be able to have a solution, because we're all going to be pushing towards different cures, right? So really, the biggest issue is that we rely on the corporations for what we need to live, right? We rely on the corporations for our food. We rely on the corporations for our housing. We rely on the corporations for our healthcare. So until we are able to stop relying on them for our essentials, for what we need to live, they will always have power over us. So if they have power over us, it's only because they control the essentials. So here's the thing, there are more of us than there are them. So the reason that just coordinating, the reason that just yelling out loud and saying, we want change, will never work, is because they control the essentials. They control what we need to live. Brandon, you are so right. And I was going to say the same thing, Miss K Mac. So anytime that you're like, this is what I am, this is the label that I am, and this is what defines it. It's like, well, number one, it's like, that is a really old label that was invented like 50 or 100 years ago. And that's not exactly what we're doing. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. Essentially, those labels were created to divide us even further. Because rather than just saying we're Americans who care about America, we say, oh, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Well, no, we're Americans who care about America. Why are you trying to split us up? And it's the same way. It's either socialist, capitalist, communist. Socialist, capitalist, communist. Which one are you? Which one are you? Which one are you? Well, I'm a business owner. I have 30 employees in 6 locations. But I also know that I couldn't do jack shit without my 30 employees. So I don't know. I guess I'm a dichotomy. I'm an enigma wrapped in a question, because it doesn't matter. I'm an American that wants to see all Americans succeed. I start with the end goal. My end goal is to have prosperity and security for everyone, because that's actually the right way to build a country. Because if you are literally focused on getting money all the time, then you're not going to take a job that provides the most value to society, are you? You're going to take a job that provides the most money to you. And if every single person stops thinking about others around them and they only accept a job that works for them, that optimizes their experience, then every single person is going to be so selfish that it ruins the experience for everybody else. Because competition makes life more difficult. Cooperation is the key. The funny part is the people that are simping for the billionaires, it's like so easy to see that the ultra wealthy are cooperating to make sure that we don't have enough. So literally, the ultra wealthy have more power because they're working together. The people that produce the food work in cahoots with the people that get our health care, work in cahoots with the people who have the housing. In fact, it's the same companies, y'all. The same 3 top companies, or just over 85% of corporations on the S&P 500 have the same 3 top shareholders. And that's where there's no competition. So they don't need to pay us more. They don't need to do anything because they have complete control over the economy. So what we are understanding is that we have got to come together to fix this, because we're not building something new. We're going back to ways of old. Because look at what life was like before corporations dominated everything. Because this is how our grandparents used to live. It was the corporations were there for some of the things when they needed them, but generally they didn't rely on the corporations for everything, right? But now that we do rely on the corporations for everything, they have complete power over us. So we need to stop relying on corporations and start relying on each other. Because we could have 100 million people in the streets tomorrow protesting. But if the very next day they have to go to the grocery store and buy groceries from the same people we're protesting against, then we don't have any power. If we have 100 million people protesting, but we all go and pay our electric bill and our internet bill and our cell phone bill to the same people we are protesting against, then we never have the power. True power is controlling the essentials. True power is controlling what you need to live. On average, Americans 50, 60, 70 years ago had one income for 40 hours a week. My grandfather was a pinball machine mechanic, had 5 kids, 2 cars, owned their own home, took vacations every year. And that's because the productivity and the pay were the same. What we made for the company was paid to the workers. But over time, corporations came in and said, hey, I know that you rely on your community for your childcare. We can help with that. I know that you rely on your community for this or that, but we can help with that. We care about your community too. Of course, the only reason, why wouldn't we care about your community? We need you to make money. So of course, we're going to offer this convenient solution for you. And yeah, they took it. From the 60s, 70s, 80s, they said, screw it. What's the worst that can happen? These corporations are looking out for us. We've got politicians to make sure those corporations don't get too greedy. We've got the media to call them out and tell us the truth. Well, the corporations took control of the economy, so they have all the money. Once they have all the money, they got the power and they started effing things up. They took over the media and completely purchased all of our factual information, so we are no longer grounded in the same reality. In fact, they tell some of us some facts, and they tell other of us alternative facts, and then we fight against each other. And then if we still had the political process on our side, then the politician's job is to correct imbalances, and they can't do that anymore. And all that we're really saying is that, is America as great as it once was? Are we really in the golden age of America? And why does me pointing this out make you so frustrated, right? That's what my real question is. Campbell Burgers, why does me pointing this out, just some random dude on the internet, why does it make you upset? Why does it make you frustrated? Is it because you know there's truth in this? That's my really only question. It confuses me when I'm like, hey, look, the cost of living and the salaries are close by. I'm a business owner, so I know that you really need to rely on your employees in order to make money. But look, it seems like corporations care more about stuffing their pockets. And all I'm doing is pointing this out. But man, people get upset. Man, people get upset, right? We're not running out of resources. It's just the 1% have taken more than their fair share. So media, we actually have a whole group that talks about this every single week. So what is the plan is the fact that we need to first recognize that greed is the disease. Recognize that it's the 1% taking more than their fair share is the problem. It's really easy to see. 1% of Americans have $50 trillion in their combined bank accounts, and 90% of Americans have $50 trillion in their combined bank accounts. And the funny part is, even the people that are sitting here defending the billionaires are way closer to being homeless than they are to being a billionaire. But they still defend the billionaires, right? But that's because the billionaires have a huge media arm that lies to them about what the problem is. And because the media have cut education for so long, people are not smart enough to figure out their lies. So that's how we get to where we are today. The way that we fix it is that we have to understand is that the power the corporations have is not because we're divided. The power the corporations have is because the corporations control our food, because the corporations control our healthcare. So the way that we fix this is that there are people in our community that are growing food, except the corporations have put themselves in between us and the food producers. So what we need to do is go around the freaking corporations. There are doctors and nurses and healthcare providers in your area, and they want nothing more than to see you get quality care at an affordable price. But corporations have stuck themselves between you and the doctor and the nurse. So what we need to do is go around them. Absolutely, 510. What we really believe is that all humans have intrinsic value, which means that they should be given for free food, housing, and healthcare. Not only because there's more than enough food, housing, and healthcare for everyone, but when people are given the things that they need to survive, they actually become more productive, not less. They are more valuable to society, not less. It is not the doctor's choice. So, and here's the thing, y'all. We still see people coming in, and look, they get so mad, right? Look at Sofa King. All I did was say, hey, the doctors that live in your community care about you more than the insurance companies do, because the insurance companies are legally obligated to make profit rather than take care of you. Food companies care about us so little that they don't care what you put in your body. They will literally put Parmesan cheese or sawdust in your Parmesan cheese if it can make them more money. The health insurance companies, you could pay them your whole life. You could pay them your whole life. And then when it comes time for that life-saving care, the CEO will check their bonus incentive, see if providing you care will hurt their opportunity to get their bonus, and will let you live or die depending on where their bonus is at. So we need to understand that when the cost of living, that's all right, Slim Reaper. This is you. Here's Slim Reaper. Actually, I'm not crying. What I am is I feel bad. I was able to have the security, the prosperity. I was given everything that I was needed to be able to take a risk, to be able to take a chance. And I was able to be successful. But not everybody was able to have that same opportunity, that same chance. Because think of it like this. The majority of Americans don't even have a couple $1,000s in their bank account. 80% of people, 208 million people, don't even have enough savings. And if you don't have any savings, you are not going to spend your last little, if you ever make any money, you're going to make sure you save that in case your car breaks down, in case of emergency. That's where it's so important that we don't have any prosperity. We don't have any security. Nobody has 1 month, 2 months, 3 months of savings. And the reason people have credit card debt is just look at the numbers. The average salary is 65 grand. After taxes, that comes out to about $3,800, $4,000 a month. Well, the average cost of living is about $3,500 or $4,000 a month. And they know that if they keep you stuck, if you've got less than $1,000 or $2,000 in your bank account, well, then you'll never have the security to leave that job, right? Earlier, we asked people, hey, could you leave your job tomorrow? Hey, Campbell, could you leave your job tomorrow? Slim Reaper, do you have enough savings to leave your job tomorrow? I bet you don't. And if you don't even have enough savings to leave a bad situation, if you don't even have enough savings to walk away, are you really free? Or are you stuck? Literally. Because if you can't quit your job tomorrow, then you are stuck there. And that's fine. We knew what you were going to say. You aren't coming here in good faith. And that's where, just a reminder to everybody, they are not the people that we care about. Because really, anybody who still has their head in the sand, anybody who still believes that America is in its heyday, we don't need to try to convince him. I mean, he's right here. 10% of people do not want this society that we are living in. But 30% of people have been tricked. 30% of people have been lied to. And those 30% of people, they've got a billionaire's thumb on the scale. So they're not really as loud and as powerful as they seem. What they really are is just, a little bit misinformed. Tony, how you doing today, sir?
I'm proud of you. Honestly, I really am. I've honestly never been more proud of you. The best way I can describe it to folks is shareholder supremacy. That's the thing I've been locking in on, because there's so many people who, it's like both sides think they're right. Like, some people might say that this entire capitalist system is completely bastardized and broken, and people are out here struggling, and it's no fault of their own, and they're largely correct. And then there's other people out here who are like, yeah, but there's people who are either ignorant or lazy, or maybe just confused. They don't know what steps to take next. And they're also right. And so this whole conversation gets so obfuscated.
Of corporate government.
It's like people can't see the real truth. it's like we all know that Samsung can make a TV where they put these capacitors right next to a heat sink, and they know that in about a year, that heat sink is going to blow the capacitors and the TV goes bad. That's terrible. That's forced obsolescence. And it's not just in your TVs, it's in your phones, it's in your cars, it's in literally everything. That is shareholder supremacy. As long as their quarterly reports go up, it doesn't matter if the products get worse. It doesn't matter if the food gets worse. And following that trend is what led us. If you're nodding your head along with what I'm saying, welcome to the club. There's maybe 1% of us. We're now the 1%. Okay? But not everybody even knows to have this conversation. And so they're busy blaming Trump or Obama. And it's just like,